So once again, this is a featured event of Debate Academy. We are doing our debate round, our model round with BDL staff, alumni, and coaches. In the other room, we have a fierce debate in Espanol. And here in this round, we have 4 excellent debaters who are going to be using this fracking case for us. So on the affirmative side, we should give it up for each of these debaters. We'll do it like basketball team style, you know. On the affirmative side, we have BDL staff member and debate guru, experienced debater, Kelly Cody. And
get easy on me.
Easy on me.
Be ready, Rainer. Be ready.
And joining Kelly Cody, we have BDL alum, graduate of the O'Brien School of Mathematics and Science, and excellent judge as well, Christian Dubon Solis. Yes. And on the negative, we have another BDL staff member, also alum, former debater, graduate of Urban Science Academy back in the day, and longtime leader here at the BDL, Rainer Fagus.
Yes. Thank you.
Rainer and his team, I believe, won this debate last year. Is that right? Or when we did it? So
that is right, but it's not winning that counts, right?
it's yes, but competition can aid in learning. Yes,
that is true. That is true.
Friendly competition, but anyway, sometimes people like to root for the underdog. So I'm just letting you know. Kelly.
Wait, hold on. Why are they the underdog? I feel like out of all these people, I have the least experience debating, considering I haven't done it in like a good 5 years.
Well, I haven't debated at least a decade.
But like you're like around the area. I feel like if anything, I'm the underdog.
I love this humility. You guys are all, if you're on this this debate, you deserve to be here. And finally, joining Rainer on the negative, again, an experienced debate guru, a BDL varsity coach, and also longtime volunteer and supporter. We have Larry Dang.
Woo! Go Larry!
Yes, right. So the 4 debaters have been spotlighted. So here's how this is going to be. We are going to use middle school JV times, and they are going to debate. The debaters are going to debate using the fracking case. The purpose for you is, one, to just get a taste of the arguments. You can flow or take notes during the round. We will open it to cross-ex. There'll be the cross-examination between the debaters, but we'll open it up to other questions by chat. And then at the end, we'll give you a poll so you can judge and vote for who you think is the winner and give your reasons for decision. The debaters will be sharing their thinking before each speech, so they'll give a little sense of their strategy. So hopefully you get a more of a taste of the strategy behind the debate, as well as this particular case. So I'm going to stop sharing. Any questions on what we will be doing in this debate round? All right, I have just 2 people. Hold on, we need to add. Well, actually, right now, the affirmative team is spotlighted, right? Everyone sees Kelly and Christian? Excellent. All right, should I spotlight everyone at once? All 4? May as well. May as well.
You can see Larry and Rainer make funny faces at our arguments.
So debaters, anything you want to say before you guys get started?
Good luck to the half team.
Oh yeah, good luck to the night. Listen, I'm very tired, so let's try to keep it down to like ground zero. All right.
Awesome.
Always the people saying that bringing.
It's true.
Marisa, is there any like context you'd like me to give before I give the 1AC?
Yeah, if you want to, I invite each, before your speech, if you have just any strategy or thinking like that you want to lay out before the speech so people have a sense. But if not, you can go right in.
Okay. I don't think I have anything to say at a time, but I'm sure I will before my 1AR. So,
Yes, that's an even more important one. Yes.
yes.
Awesome. All right, Kelly.
Alrighty, high stakes. Okay, before I start, is anyone not ready? Okay. Contention 1 is inherency. The United States has broadly adopted fracking as a technique to extract oil and natural gas across the nation. That's Santiago and Elliott 2019. The United States leads the world in natural gas output. There is a reason for the surge, fracking. Techniques spurred a historic US boom. Though these methods have existed for years, they were applied to dense rock formations only 2 decades ago as technologies improved. And fracking damages water resources and the broader environment. That's English 2020. One of the largest pollutants released from fracking is methane. In the United States alone, 13 million metric tons of methane is released annually from natural gas wells. Every step of fracking releases carcinogens into the air and water, can impact respiratory health, cause nervous system damage, and cancer. Fracking also utilizes water, billions of gallons each year. This water cannot be recycled efficiently after it is contaminated. Contention 2 is the climate change advantage. Climate change will cause a refugee crisis, wars around the world, and more frequent natural disasters. That's Obama 2020. Climate change could contribute to record temperatures. The clear consensus among scientists was that in the absence of bold, coordinated action to reduce emissions, temperatures were destined to climb another 2 degrees Celsius. Past that point, the planet could experience an accelerated melting of ice caps, rising oceans, and extreme weather from which there was no return. The best estimates involved a hellish combination of severe coastal flooding, drought, wildfire, and hurricanes that stood to displace millions of people, overwhelm the capacities of government. This in turn would increase the risk of global conflict and insect-borne diseases. And climate change disproportionately harms vulnerable populations. That's Boyd and Barrett 2018. Wildfires, extreme heat, coastal flooding, water shortages, and health problems won't affect everyone equally. People living in poverty, tribal communities, immigrants, and elderly are expected to suffer disproportionately. Many impoverished communities face financial, social, political, and environmental barriers. They also frequently live in areas who are vulnerable to natural disasters, yet many lack insurance and other economic means to recover. Climate change is a threat multiplier. It will exacerbate a lot of poverty and pollution in communities that are already impacted. Thus, the plan. The United States federal government should phase out fracking in the United States over the next 5 years. Contention 3 is solvency. Phasing out fracking over the next few years is necessary to save the planet. That's RAS in 2020. A bill introduced by Bernie Sanders would ban fracking nationwide by 2025. The legislation would immediately prevent federal agencies from issuing federal permits for expanded fracking. Permits would be revoked for wells where fracking takes place and that are within 2,500 feet of a home, school, or other inhabited structure. The wells would be required to stop operations. Fracking for oil and natural gas would become illegal on all onshore and offshore land in the United States by January 1st, 2025. If we are serious about clean air and drinking water, about combating climate change, the only safe and sane way to move forward is to ban fracking nationwide. And Biden is trying to work with other countries to reduce climate change, but those countries won't be convinced until the entire federal government is involved. That's Holtman and Gross 2021. The world sees the importance of United States action to limit overall global temperature rise. However, 4 years of US absence from the global climate community, including global climate change negotiations and international efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, have left a big gap in international leadership and credibility. Credible US action is critical. In the United States, if the United States fails to make commitments that the rest of the world views as serious, it will be harder to pressure other countries to take more serious action. And businesses are committed to following presidential leadership on climate change. That's Woolart 21. Business to Biden. If you raise the bar on climate, we will too. Corporations asked Biden to commit to cutting US greenhouse gas emissions. They made him an offer. If you raise the bar on our national ambition, we will raise our ambition to move the United States forward on this journey. You alone can set the course by swiftly establishing a bold US 2030 target. And we don't need to see if any futuristic technology pans out. We can solve with the tools we have right now. Banning fracking would encourage us to work more on new technology. That's Roberts 2020. it is still possible to reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. Specifically, it's possible to reduce U.S. emissions 70% to 80% by 2035 and to zero by 2050. Through rapid electrification, relying on 5 already well-developed technologies, wind and solar power plants, rooftop solar, electrical vehicles, heat pumps, and batteries, substitution of clean energy technologies for their fossil fuel counterparts must ramp up to 100% as fast as possible after a brief period of industrial mobilization. An aggressive production ramp up of 3 to 5 years, followed by an intensive deployment of decarbonized infrastructure and the technology up to 2035. Larry, I believe you are cross-exing me.
Cool. I'm good. Are you?
So is it open or closed?
Oh, I always thought it was open. I don't know. Y'all want to do it?
I'm good with
I don't-
open, but
Yeah.
Yeah, can we do it open?
yeah.
Rainer, can you explain for people what the difference between open and closed is?
Yes. So thank you, Marisa. That's good. So the difference in open and closed is just like, so if it was a closed cross-ex, only one person would be questioning somebody else, and only that person would be able to answer. So because I'm going to speak next, Larry would be questioning Kelly, and then I would just wait on the sideline until it's done. Then I'll go next. When it's open, all 4 debaters can answer and ask questions.
Okay, cool. Well, in that case, Rainer, just send a quick message in the chat if you want to intervene with a question. But otherwise, if Kelly, you're good, I'm good to start. Awesome. So I have 5 questions. So forgive me if I'm a bit rushed with this. First, how many years is a few years as per the plan text? The Fresno evidence says Bernie Sanders has a plan to commit to 2025. Will you commit to that as your plan?
Yeah, so the bill specifically outlines a very detailed plan of incremental phase out until 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, depending on when the plan is passed, it'd probably like be pushed, but yes.
Sure, fair. The Holtman evidence on the international relations stuff about other countries following U.S. credible action, it says that credible U.S. action is, quote, critical. That means it's necessary, but not per se sufficient. What is the bar for sufficient leadership for other countries to follow on? And how do you know that's the
So, I mean, I can't personally speak from other countries, but empirically, different climate change policies, such as like large reductions and like, oil reserves, or like, I can't give a specific empirical example, but I would say probably this large reduction in like fracking, especially since the United States is such a substantial output of those emissions, as well as like probably rejoining like the Paris Agreement and things that would spur activities like that. Does that make sense?
Okay, sure.
Sorry, Larry, I don't know if you have another follow-up, but I had a quick question. So can you tell us why you think that if you reduce fracking here, that the U.S. won't just increase import from other countries to make up for the shortfall here?
So right now, our evidence indicates that other countries are kind of waiting for a signal from the United States.
Not in terms of like, I'm talking about in terms of, because we have to power things, right? So how do you know if we reduce production here, that they won't just like tap into other countries, saying like the OPEC countries who just bring in more oil and more natural gas from overseas? Do you have any evidence saying that?
So our evidence is indicative of like Saved by the Bell.
I know it is. All right, so I'm gonna be speaking next. But before you start, I'll just give a context. So the debater is watching. So Kelly just went and just kind of outlined the inherency, why we should, the main issues why we should care, like the harms, and then also like what they plan to do about it, which is like to phase out fracking. So for me, my goal is to really like highlight the parts that I think are really important. So what we'll do is like trying to give some framing at the very top, like how you should look at the debate round so far, but also going through and like addressing some of the exact points that Kelly made, and then making some new points myself in terms of just like why I think like the plan won't solve, and also like why I think the way they're thinking about it is not the best way to think about it. So that's going to be my job within the next 5 minutes that I have for this part.
Rainer, do you mind if I interject really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in general about flowing, since we're all here and we're starting the debate, we can start on like a nice page. So how I usually flow affirmative, because this is all going to be a case debate, there's not going to be anything external to that. So I'll flow each contention on a separate piece of paper. And I would highly recommend that. It just helps keep things organized. So I have my inherency debate on one piece of paper, the climate change or the advantage debate on one paper, and then my solvency debate. So as I flow, it'll all be separate, and we can all kind of communicate amongst the debate, like where we are in the debate. So it just makes more sense.
All right. If we are good, I can get started. Marisa, are you keeping time? Yeah, I'll keep time as well, but yeah, we can get started. So first, just to kick things off, fracking is not the central issue here that we're discussing, it's climate change. And our affirmative team is essentially saying like all these things, bad things are going to happen, is going to be a result of climate change. So they're failing to see, they're missing the forest for the trees, thinking that the United States just reducing fracking automatically will solve all of these other issues. So number one, I was starting to ask about this, is the fact that even if we were to reduce the energy output from here, the United States would just tap into other nations saying like, hey, we need more oil here, we need more natural gas. So there actually won't be any net decrease in terms of like all the energy that's being consumed here, which they have not read any evidence outlining what that is. So starting with my first point on case, is the fact that their case is not even, has no inherency. Essentially, inherency has to tell you like why there are any inherent barriers to keeping the plane from happening. We know this because one, they already read that this plane is already in Congress, like they're already considering it. And two, there are already states around the country that are starting to rolling their own bans. So there's literally no reason why you should vote for that plans, because this is already happening. So there's literally no reason. And it says, my evidence is first, fracking is not a major concern today. Fracking bans are rolling across the nation from coast to coast, even in Texas. This is from Food and Water Watch 2017. Over 400 cities and over 20 states have passed local resolutions to either ban fracking or instate a moratorium, including New Jersey, California, Colorado, Michigan, and as you guys just did an activity, a lot of other states are already considering this. And Texas enacted HB 40 that has the right to ban fracking in the whole state. And second, abandoning fracking will cause major disruption in the climate change process. So first subpoint is the fact that fracking ban would cause us to shift back to coal, not pivot to renewable energy. So the fact is like when we have to power all of this, the energy that we're using, the Wi-Fi we're using needs to be powered. There's no fairy that's going to solve all of these things just because you remove fracking, right? So any reduction in that is going to cause us to adopt other methods of energy production like coal, which is a lot dirtier than fracking is. That's the one thing that they're not considering. This is from Greenstone AR 2018. A nationwide ban on fracking would be a terrible idea. Coal will come back roaring. It's not as though you're going to have a step function increase in renewable energy in a way that could satisfy the nature of energy demand that we have today. As I mentioned, we have to follow all of this, and they have not said like exactly how they're going to replace all that decrease that they're advocating for. Subpoint B is that climate change will force us to make big systemic changes that will save us from ecological destruction. Banning fracking will slow down the systemic changes by creating the perception that the risks have been mitigated. So what's happening is they're making it look like, hey, this is a solution. But once you have people thinking like, hey, we've already solved this, they're actually not going to want to invest in actually trying to make the systemic changes that we actually need to actually solve this problem. That's the problem here with just like going and throwing a drop in the bucket and saying like, hey, we're actually making progress when it's not really progress at all. So this is my evidence from Rebuttal 2019. Our climate change devastated future will bring about an era of global abundance. Thanks to capitalism, technological progress, and we'll learn to produce more food, more goods with less, and even as the planet heats up and resources dwindle. We used to increase our prosperity by taking more from the earth every year. Now we know that we can grow and flourish while taking less. Moving on to solvency. This is the thing I want you to keep in mind, debaters. They cannot solve the problems that they've just outlined. So the main thing is it's like, hey, climate change is happening. They cannot solve this. And as long as we can prove that they cannot solve it, we win the debate. And number two, as I mentioned, their point, we already win on inherency because this is already being considered and there's little reason for their point. But this point itself, I want you to keep that in mind. Can they solve? It's not like are they making it a little bit better, is can they solve? That is the bar. Don't grade them on a curve. That is the bar. So let's start with solvency. Third, the app will not solve climate change or environmental destruction issues. They simply are not sufficient. Banning fracking is a drop in the bucket. Only global widespread adoption of clean tech across many industries can solve global warming. That is from Brook 2010. 60 companies all had technologies which, if put together and applied widely worldwide, could solve most of the world's environmental problems. In order to attract sustainable levels of investment into emerging clean technology industries and to do so at the lowest cost, there needs to be clarity down to quite the detail level in terms of the regulatory framework. Number two, the US federal government isn't the central leader in the climate change. Warming is already being addressed by other countries, states, and cities. This is from Robin Nowitz 2017. And before I actually read this, we know this is not the case. Like when Trump administration withdrew from the Paris Accord agreement, they still kept going. Europe still stepped up to make to fill in the gap. And this evidence says other countries are not poised to abandon their greenhouse gas cutting emissions. From when the results of 2016 elections rolled in, they kept working. The global economy is set towards decarbonizing, or with or without the Trump administration. And this is my time, and we will continue within this line of thinking on the next speech. Thank you very much. I stand open for crosswords.
You ready?
Yep.
So your climate change and the Rubitsky evidence says that delusional incremental steps to stop climate change and environmental harm, like thinner aluminum cans and like marketing campaigns, are actually what like inhibits action on climate change. Why is that analogous to fracking, which is like a giant, like environmentally unfriendly industry?
Well, because it's similar in nature, right? Where it's like you're doing something that's marginal, trying to build it as something that is substantial. And it's within the line of similar analysis. That's why we're using that.
I guess, what is the line you draw from something being marginal versus substantial?
Well, so the line I draw is the fact that when you think about how much fracking is contributing to like the total global impact, it is not as substantial as you are billing it to be. That's what I'm saying as marginal, like a smaller than a small part of the pie.
Well, so I guess my question is, like, for example, like fracking releases 13 million metric tons of methane. So like, do you have like a specific number or like just a certain exact bright line in mind?
That's a great question, actually. So 13 million ton of methane, right? How much does the globe emit in total? Do you know that?
I don't know have that number, but
you're the affirmative. You're trying to bring about change, but you don't know the total. But you're telling me you're gonna question me about what's substantial?
The second, we are the second most emitter of that gas.
But how much do you know that's coming from fracking versus like everything else?
Of methane? I mean, I don't know.
Do you have evidence for like how much is fracking actually contributes to the total emission of methane by the United States?
Metric tons is
no, but what percentage is that?
If I could just interject here. So
Okay.
as a matter of relativity, 6,500 metric tons are released by the United States of greenhouse gases in an entire year. 13 million out of 6,500 seems to me like a drop in the bucket.
And that's not even considering the whole global, the whole output from the globe, from the rest of the countries as well.
Sure. So you okay. Christian, do you need any time?
Well, give me like a minute.
Okay.
So while Kristen's taking his minute of prep, debaters, if you have other questions that you would ask for either team thus far, please put them in the chat. Or if you just have questions about things that are happening in the debate round that you want to learn more about. So any cross-ex questions or any other questions or comments you want to put so far? And for folks who just joined, I saw a question in the chat. We are in the English language round. We just did the first two constructive speeches, as well as the cross-examination. Henderson High School asks, how much money would the US lose if we stopped fracking?
You want to address it to one particular team or for everybody?
I'd say, well, we'll keep it, since we're doing an untraditional round, we'll keep it open to either team if they want to answer that. Charlestown High also has a shout out to Rayner's reasoning skills and explanation.
So I can't speak to the money issue. Rayner, feel free to jump in, but in terms of the positive side of fracking, they're not arguing necessarily that fracking is a positive thing. Their main argument is that by stopping fracking, it will cause more detrimental things like us to ramp up coal production or to shift to exporting from other places so we can't solve. So it's not that they're saying like fracking's good for people, it's just like the act of stopping fracking is bad.
And that it won't solve. Actually, there's another actually question about the debate structure itself. Can you speak more to the dynamic of cross-ex where there's interruption from the other team? What is the role of interruption as a debate strategy? That is a good question. So it's kind of a balance where it's like you have questions you want to get to and they want to answer it, right? So like, let's say you ask me a question and I'm going around the world trying to explain it now, but you have 5 questions. You can gently say, like, thank you, but I'd just like to move on to my next question. You kind of have to interrupt if they're taking too long because sometimes it's strategy to make sure that you don't get to your other questions. So you want to do it, but you don't want to be too aggressive with it in terms of saying like, I thank you, and just like cut it off like next. You want to be mindful of the fact that, it's still someone that you're debating against. So, yeah.
Thank you. And there's some other questions here. So I'm going to just read them aloud because there's more speeches to come and debaters may be able to address these as we go. So Erica from BGA writes, can someone clarify for a debater, what is the positive side of fracking? Having a hard time seeing it. Hodman has 2 questions. I would ask the affirmative if they would accept nuclear as an alternative to natural gas. And from Henderson, for the affirmative, what do you suggest we do to stop climate change? Codman also asks, how do we make up for the drop in the availability of gas? So thank you for these great questions. So we'll let that percolate and we will move into the second affirmative constructive speech with Christian.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm very tired, but I'll try to keep up the energy, at least for this sake. So going into the 2AC, my job is kind of extend some points, as well as adjust some points from the 1NC, and then some of the specific points that I'm going to be extending here, some inherency, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the harms a little bit more, but we're going to take a slightly different approach, and then we're going to end it off with a solvency, and I think that should be it. Yes. And I will be timing myself as well, but you can start the timer in 3, 2, 1. Great. So first, fracking is a major concern today. Their Food and Water Watch 17 evidence card only references about 400 cities or so in 20 states that are currently banning fracking. That isn't enough to solve. We need a large federal mandate that the plan enacts. Next, the current fracking bans are not enough. So we're referencing back to a Holtman and Gross 2021 and Woolard 2021 cards. Even if some subsets of the U.S. have started banning fracking, the U.S. needs to signal an international policy to get other countries and U.S. businesses fully on board to stop warming. The reduced cost of fracking will cause the amount of fracking to increase in 2022, a mean 21. EIA expects crude oil production to increase in 2022 because of increased drilling as prices remain at $50 per barrel. EIA estimates natural gas production will rise by 2%. And then I'm going to be moving on to my advantage or my harms. And this one's I'm going to be talking about individual health. So even if we don't win our climate change terminal impact, fracking is poisoning our water with radium, which causes cancer, blood disorders, and leukemia. Pace and Weatherington, Rice 17. Of chemicals used in different stages of fracturing, radium-226 is most worrisome. Once it enters the human body, it seeks to find a home in our bones where it will emit its self-formation destabilizing effects that cause leukemia, bone cancer, blood disorders, and other diseases. And now I'm just going to be, answering some of their arguments, specifically how they mentioned a fracking ban would somewhat cause would cause a shift back to coal. We're saying that's not true. It won't cause a shift back to coal. So if you cross apply our inherency arguments, I feel like the business card, I can't exactly recall what it was that Kelly wrote. I think it was the Waller 21 card. Then it kind of signals that the U.S. federal government, the businesses are waiting for the U.S. federal government to signal a shift to green energy and that they are willing to get on board the green energy train and not revert back to coal. And if we extend a Roberts 20 card, a shift to complete green energy is possible if we start the shift now. And then we want to transition, and then I'm going to talk about how fracking prevents a transition to green energy while driving up climate change. This is going to be from Cho 14. If the availability of cheap and plentiful natural gas makes cleaner energy sources such as nuclear, hydroelectric, and renewables less competitive, the sure methods of combating global warming could lose headway. New investments in renewables were the lowest since 2010. Unless the methane emissions associated with natural gas production can be curbed, the climate benefits of natural gas can be undone. And then continuing fracking now makes it harder to get rid of later. Add their 16. The more we build up the natural gas industry now, the harder it will be to get rid of later. Gas companies become more powerful and a political economy is built up around them. Renewables could be much more affordable, viable, and widespread by 2025 than pro-gas analysts expect. Prices for solar and wind power have plummeted. And then the negative say that banning fracking will slow down systemic changes in place by creating a perception that like the risk has been mitigated. Essentially, fracking isn't as big of a deal as we're making out to be, or it's not a big systemic change that needs to be implemented. But in actuality, banning fracking is a big systemic change that will save us from potential ecological disaster. If we go back to our English 20 card, fracking is one of the largest contributors to climate change and human health, releasing 13 million metric tons of methane annually, and responding to the a drop in the bucket, like 13 out of 65. I think it was 65 million, if I remember correctly. I feel like that's bordering like, yes, that will actually make a really big difference. The card is also talking about, sorry, skipping that point. And then lastly, we need to reduce global warming whenever possible so you can reduce it as much as possible. Illing 19. It's important not to see that this in binary terms. It's not a matter of whether climate change is here or not. Every upward tick of temperature will make things worse. We can avoid suffering by reducing it as much as possible. No matter how bad it gets, how hot it gets, we'll still have the ability to make successive decades relatively less hot, and we should never stop trying. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my solvency. First, the AF can solve climate change. Banning fracking is the only way to enable widespread adoption of clean tech across many industries, which can solve global warming as mentioned in our. The US federal government can and has the potential to be a central leader in climate change. If you refer to our, moving on. Sorry, cut that part. And other nations use US inaction as an excuse to not care about climate change. Crabtree 14. We don't have to choose between a healthy economy and a healthy environment. Taking action to address carbon pollution will help fight climate change and sharpen America's competitive edge, spur innovation, and create jobs. When the US raises its carbon and clean energy standards, other nations will follow, especially those that have used our inaction as an excuse. Did not think I would actually get through all that.
Cross-X, you guys ready?
Hold up. Sure.
I can start. I'd just like to pick up where you left off, which is just like the African solve climate change. Was there no warming happening before fracking?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
So there was
fracking just kind of like expedites. Like
so there was
that's
warming.
a problem.
So there was warming happening before fracking, right?
Sure. Yes.
So what makes you think you'll be able to solve climate change by getting rid of fracking if even before there was fracking, there was still climate change?
Well, I
can answer the question.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, so there's two central answers to that. So first, the argument isn't that there was never warming before this point in time. It's that once we surpass a certain degree of warming, once we get past 2 more degrees in Celsius warming, that's when we hit the tipping point. It's irreversible. We cannot come back from that point. The second thing is we are arguing that this large United States federal policy to retract fracking is large enough to signal globally that we want to fully commit to reducing our impact on climate change.
So thank you. So how do you address the fact that the world kept their commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions even after we stepped back under the Trump administration? How do you explain that?
Can you rephrase your question?
So when the Trump administration, stepped back from the commitments of like the Paris Accord agreement, the world kept going, right? Kept reducing it. What makes you think that U.S. leadership is so necessary in this field?
Well, if we're one of the top emitters of like natural gas, we're inherently tied to this problem.
But that's not the argument you're making, though. You're saying that you need our leadership. So I'll move on to my next one, just because I do have a lot of questions. So thank you for that. The other thing, you mentioned how the business community seems to be ready to go on board with. Oh, that's time. That is time. All right. Wait.
Thank you. And so there are some more both comments, a comment from Mahalia about the the climate and health impacts of fracking, as well as a few more questions from Fenway and Elliott and Henderson.
Well, those are some great questions, actually.
Some excellent questions in the chat.
I mean, if I'm a debater here and I know I have to debate this later, I'm writing this down.
Mm-hmm.
Should we answer? Like, should we try answering? Like, is it? Do we just answer whenever, or are we gonna wait for Larry to give us?
Well,
Y'all can talk. I'm ready whenever y'all are.
yeah, why don't you, if you want to maybe pick one of those to answer. And then again, it also gives a little pointing about in the rebuttals what you might want to be touching on as well.
Well, I mean, yeah, for at least that, like, how can banning fracking solve climate change? So, well, I think that's at the core of this. I personally, like, there's personal opinions and there's, like, you know, BDL opinions. I personally don't like the app in this, but I still have to debate for it. Just like seeing it from different perspectives. For the app at least, right? Fracking, when it the process of fracking releases tons of greenhouse gases, particularly methane. I think it was and you can look at the stats for that. I think it was 13 million metric tons, which, you know, just worsens climate change. So by banning fracking, we're essentially reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, which will hopefully reduce those greenhouse gas emissions that will steadily reduce the global temperature, which I think is I'm not sure what it currently is, but I think at like a certain point, like I think at 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, it's like when it gets, scientists predict it's going to get really bad.
Thank you. So Larry, if you are ready, I'll invite you to jump in with your speech. Which for those following along, we are now on the second negative constructive. So this is the last of the constructive speeches where the two teams are laying out their initial arguments and building them. Then we'll move into the rebuttals, which we'll talk more about. Oh, and Elliot, Larry also has some good responses in the chat, and Elliot, thank you for these great questions.
Yeah, so I tried to answer some of the sort of nuance of some of the questions that we didn't get to in written form in the chat. So feel free to read. In terms of the negative block, Rainer and I are splitting the next 8 minutes worth of speech time. And so the 2NC is going to cover the substance of what the 2AC talked about and focus on responding using the 2 turns that we read that were about coal and larger systemic climate change issues. And the 1NR is going to focus on addressing the inherency and solvency questions that the 1NC spent a lot of time on.
And Larry, can you just explain what the negative block is?
Yeah, for sure. So the negative block is it is called that because it is a set of 2 speeches where the negative, unlike the rest of the debate, speaks the same side 2 speeches in a row. So it'll be the 2NC and then cross-ex of the 2NC and then the 1NR, in contrast to the rest of the debate when it's like AF-neg, AF-neg. It's referred to this because it's a bigger block of time than any other speech in the round and is an opportunity for the negative to do some catching up. The AF starts the debate, it ends the debate, and the negative block gives the negative a bunch of time to lay it on the AF and put a lot of pressure on the 1AR. So our goal is to put out a lot of good arguments to make Kelly really, really stressed. I don't know if other people saw, but she made a crying face, which I'm hoping continues.
You want me to cry?
Sorry.
God.
No, I'm sorry. I want you to make a crying face emoji thing. No, this is all friendly. So is anyone not ready?
I'm never ready, but let's go.
Sorry. Fair. Fracking is not the central issue in climate change. The 1AC is missing the forest for the trees. Climate change is an international crisis, but banning fracking is a drop in the bucket that will slow down systemic progress. Think of major national progress that is being run through Congress, like the Green New Deal or proposals for carbon caps on the total amount of emissions that the United States can produce. You should vote negative because banning fracking will do more harm than good by causing a shift back to harmful coal over safe fracking and slow important momentum in the environmental movement. You can vote negative on either presumption or the turns arguments. The AF both does not solve for climate change issues, and stopping fracking will actively harm the broader environmental movement, which is far more important. First, you can extend the greenstone evidence. Coal will come roaring back. The United States does not currently have enough sufficient renewable energy infrastructure in order to provide energy to all places in the United States without a reliable source of greenhouse gases, which means that if we ban fracking, the loss of natural gas that is currently being used to heat homes and power the country will cause a reversion back to coal, which is still cheap enough to be an economically and financially viable path for places to use. This means that we will burn an even more harmful substance, which will cause greater climate change impacts. They're going to make the claim that we will shift to renewable energy, but that can only be true if they first prove that we have enough renewable energy infrastructure to do so. Now go to the line by line of what the 2AC said. The first thing at the top was their extension of the Holtman and Wohlert evidence about needing US leadership for other countries and businesses. First, both pieces of evidence say that these are necessary but not sufficient. US leadership may be something that is important, but it does not do enough to solve climate change. And it furthermore does not say that banning fracking is even close to what is necessary to cause businesses and other countries to follow the United States' leadership. Goals like the Green New Deal and carbon caps are far closer to what we need, and banning fracking will cause us to lose political momentum that is necessary for us to be able to achieve goals like that. Bans on fracking allow the Biden administration to claim wins on the environment and stop the bar there, which means that we'll never achieve the things like what the Wohlert evidence talks about, like carbon caps by 2030 that are necessary to cause other countries and businesses to follow. Now, second, you can extend the Rubitsky evidence from the 1NC. It's about relativity. Fracking bans are a temporary signal, but cause no real change. It's 13 million tons as per their evidence, out of 6,500 million tons per year produced by the United States of greenhouse gases, which means this does not do enough to shift the bar in climate change. Now, they say chemicals from fracking hurt people, but first, their evidence doesn't say that fracking is what causes these chemical issues that lead to leukemia and other terrible human effects, which means that you can't pin that on fracking exclusively from the evidence that they've provided. The 1AR has to raise the bar on this in order for you to buy this claim. Now, second, fracking doesn't contaminate groundwater. That's the IPAA no date evidence. More than 25 scientific peer-reviewed studies and expert assessments have concluded that hydraulic fracturing is not a major threat to groundwater. Studies specifically ruled out fracking as the cause. Pennsylvania State University 2018, University of Cincinnati 2018, the Academy of Medicine, Engineering, and Science of Texas 2017, the United States Geological Survey 2017, and Duke University funded by Natural Resources Defense Council in 2017. All of these sources have shown that fracking does not hurt groundwater in the way that they say will lead to the health problems that they're claiming. Now, they say that green investments cause us to we lose headway in green investments by not banning fracking. First, the Cho evidence that they read is from 2014. Green investments have continued despite fracking continuing, which means that we can rest assured that not banning fracking will not stop us from investing in renewable energy. Second, we need to be ready for green investments to take over an energy infrastructure in order for us to actually make the transition. They say it's harder to get rid of fracking later. First, the Adler evidence is about gas companies having power. This is the same as the status quo, which means that the act doesn't fundamentally change the structure of gas companies having power in politics. Now, last, they say other countries use U.S. inaction as an excuse. They won't follow on if the United States isn't a real leader. China and the European Union have way bigger goals, like going completely carbon neutral, which makes a fracking ban completely null. Ready for cross-ex.
Listen, I didn't hear the last part you finished, but sorry. List, give me like a second.
Oh, sorry, I'm thumbs upping. I realized you're not.
Did we start the timer for cross-ex then? Marissa?
No, I'm
I didn't start it yet. Yep.
okay.
Okay. Well, I only have like a couple questions, and I don't really have your shell as well because I don't see it, but I'm just gonna go based off the cards then. So you mentioned that the U.S. leadership is necessary but not sufficient. Can you elaborate more on that?
Sure. So y'all make the claim that U.S. leadership is key to cause other countries to also pursue environmental goals, right? To also like do things like ban fracking and pursue like environmentally conscious leadership. The Holtman and Wohlert evidence both say that it's critical to have U.S. leadership, but it doesn't say that having U.S. leadership is enough to solve climate change. And so the argument here for the negative is that the US can become a leader by banning fracking, but that doesn't solve climate change because you need to prove that US leadership is also sufficient to address the issue. Like something can be necessary and you need to do it, but you have to do other stuff too for it to actually achieve the scope that you need.
Okay, and then you also mentioned that so in your Greenstone et al. 18, it says that renewable energy is already entering the market at a fast pace. But then you say by banning fracking, we would revert back to coal almost immediately. So which is it? Are we like, is it going to like, is renewable energy growing at a fast pace to the point that we would use it instead of coal, or is coal still more viable? And can you elaborate on that?
Definitely the latter. Coal is still a viable alternative.
Renewable is it more than the currently progressing fast pace, like increasing market?
Yes.
Do you have any way to like measure that or like kind of measure that in like a quantifiable way?
Sure. I guess like I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the simple math of it is like where can you burn coal and where can you access renewable energy? Can I install a solar panel in all of Ohio really fast, or can I ship coal to Ohio really fast? You can ship coal to Ohio really fast.
It would be like, okay. I don't have any other questions. Do you have any, Kelly?
We're out of time too.
Oh, well, we have 5 seconds. You can ask it really fast.
Thank you. So there's, we're getting some shout outs to Larry for your speech. And a couple of other great questions, both to the neg and the AF in here from Elliot and Brooke. But does the negative team need, Rainer, do you want some time to prep?
I'll take a minute. Put things in order.
I can answer some of the technical questions if that's of interest, Marisa.
That would be great.
Yeah. Okay. I'll start from the top. Where will we get the majority of gas and oil if we ban fracking? Good question. So for the AF, the argument is that we'll switch to using things like solar energy, wind energy, other forms of renewable energy. And so we would stop using oil and gas. For the negative, the argument is we might start importing it or using other methods to drill that are more dangerous than fracking. So fracking is actually being hailed as like a really innovative, and it's not new at this point, but is being hailed as something that is cleaner and safer than traditional oil drilling. Because like in one, you take a literal drill and you go all the way down into the earth and you have a giant well. And in fracking, y'all might notice in the packet, there's a couple images that show this. It's supposed to be much more localized and in that way considered safer. But there's a major debate about that. And either way causes us to burn greenhouse gases. Why aren't we concerned about climate change? So no one in this particular debate is arguing that we shouldn't be concerned about climate change. But the question is banning fracking the right way to address that? Can we do this plan first, or do we need to wait for bigger changes? Are we worried that we'll go back to coal? Jobs in fracking, great question. That's not a part of this debate, but it's definitely a big part of the major national conversation about fracking. A lot of people are worried that their families will be harmed by banning fracking because this is a major source of income in like fracking states like Pennsylvania, where it was a huge issue in the 2020 presidential election. And part of the argument for people arguing for renewable energy is that we would create new jobs in these sectors, which would allow for people to do that. And then how can we be sure there's a reliable source and groundwater isn't being polluted? The evidence in the packet is okay about this. The neg says there are studies that say it isn't being harmed. The AF says that there are studies that are being harmed. Both exist. And that there's a reliable source of energy. Great question. This is something I'll leave off by recommending that y'all look into yourselves. You can actually see relative prices of energy in different places where you can access solar energy or not. There's a lot of solar co-ops in Massachusetts that you can even get your own families connected to if you're interested.
I'm ready, by the way. I think there's a question from Finway.
Yes, Finway, go ahead.
Would switching to a more renewable energy source require more maintenance and long lifespans sticking with fracking?
Did you hear?
Not quite.
Yes, yes, wouldn't switching to another energy source require a lot more maintenance and construction and be more expensive than just sticking with fracking?
That's what the neg says. Hopefully you think that that's true for our purposes. But yeah, definitely a good question and part of the conversation. And there's robust literature about this. Would highly recommend reading into it. People are making arguments definitely on both sides of the aisle on this.
Awesome. Thanks for that question. So we're going to move to Rainer, who is bringing us into the rebuttals. And Rainer, do you want to talk at all about your strategy?
Yeah. So right now, this is so as you can see, Larry just went. I'm going to go as well. We're both neg. So this is really like the main advantage in the round for the negative team because the AF gets to go first and they also get to speak last. So we really want to like use that time to like just try to make Kelly's job as difficult as possible. So Larry just went and addressed a lot of the arguments that were made in the 2AC, going like line by line, and then also providing some framework as well at the top. And so my job is to like, as much as possible, not repeat what he's already done, because otherwise I'm giving Kelly a way out to just like group things and just make it easy. Is to just like really focus on parts that he didn't really focus on as much to try to make it where spread it out. And then also try to give you like, start framing the round of like how you should be voting. So that's really the two things I'll be trying to do. All right, and we have 3 minutes for that. Yes, so all right, let me time myself. I'll start. All right, so thank you guys for listening to us. So first thing I want to make clear is, and this is something that Larry mentioned, but I want to expand on, the AF never really addressed the fact that this plan has no inherency. Essentially, it's the fact that there are already bans happening across the nation. We mentioned like 20 states, and we mentioned many other municipalities already floating the idea of banning it. And also the fact that there's already a plan in Congress to try to do this very thing. We win just on that. We can all go home, given the fact that there's literally no inherency. If there's no inherency, there's really no need for the plan because this is going to happen anyway. That's what really, that's the point of inherency. Like, what is the inherent barrier keeping your plan from happening? They have not touched this at all. Now we're in the rebuttal, and now they're going to try to sneak in an argument. Do not let them do that. So just on that alone, we win the debate round. But we'll continue. The other thing we just want to focus on is the other piece that they just don't solve. It doesn't matter if you think fracking is, we should ban fracking. It doesn't matter even if you think their plan has an inherency. If they don't solve, you must vote for us. That is their job, is to solve. It doesn't matter. We don't have to propose an alternative that is better than theirs. That is not our job. Our job is to show you that they don't solve. And it's simple. Number one, during the cross-ex, I already asked the AF team, like, was there warming already happening before there was fracking? And they considered this was already happening. So it follows that even if you were to stop fracking, warming was still happening. But they made this dubious claim saying like, hey, we will solve global warming. And even by their own logic, that is actually not the truth. And also, the other piece is the fact that, and you guys have mentioned this in the chat, is the fact that when you remove fracking from the equation, you remove that energy source, we need to fill in that gap. We need to fill in that gap. So we'll just be importing things from overseas and also reverting back to coal, as my partner already elaborated on in his speech about the fact that this is a cheaper energy to burn. And also this is something that we'll be more likely to do given the fact that we need to power all the things that we have. So this is really what the debate comes down to. Do you believe that their plan has an inherent barrier to keep it from happening? And it's no, they never even addressed it. So they dropped it completely. So we went on that. And two, do you believe that they solved? And they do not. They have not read anything specifically talking about just like what is the significant impact that fracking will have. They're just throwing out numbers, but in without context, just abstract, 13 million, but 13 million out of what? We actually had to provide that information for them. So do not believe that they actually solved. And so what is the role of the ballot? Vote for the team you think is actually advancing real conversation about how to actually solve the climate crisis. Vote for the team that you think actually creates the best environment for these technologies to actually develop without giving us this false sense of security that is actually not there. And vote for the team that you think can actually bring about real change into this particular issue, given the fact that we are trying to focus on addressing the real significant contributors to climate change and not just the things that are easy to be done, which is what the affirmative team is claiming to be the case. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will, of course, be taking prep.
Yes. How much time would you like? Whatever time it is.
We haven't been timing prep. So.
We haven't been. So take your time. While Kelly is prepping, Rainer, you used the phrase roll of the ballot. Can you explain that? And then also, can someone talk about how you allocate prep time? Like if you have 5 minutes for middle school or 8 minutes for high school, like how do you portion that out over the course of the debate round?
I can start with the prep time. That's actually something that's really relevant, especially I do see it in middle school. If you take prep time, it doesn't mean that you're not prepared. It doesn't mean that you're not ready. I know some debaters feel that way. It just means that, you are taking your time to arrange your arguments, especially it's like if it's a new case, you want to make sure you're ordering your thoughts, because like once you get up there and the time is ticking, you get really nervous in terms of like, okay, like how do I actually, what am I going to read? And where's this piece of paper that I put here? And all of a sudden you just like, you're shuffling things around and it becomes difficult. It just means that you take time, and that's why it's there. It's there so you can use it. In terms of allocating time, so for example, with the AF, the first speech is already like, you already know what it's going to be. So there are speeches in the round, you already know what they're going to be. So you don't want to really be taking a lot of time for those. It's really like, for example, the rebuttal, it's really based on like what they read, where they're going with it, what they think they're winning on, and all these other things. So you want to like take time for this. Like, for example, while Kelly's taking prep, that's necessary just because we just spent 8 minutes talking and she will have 3 minutes to respond to everything. So you definitely want to take time to really like see, okay, what are some similarities? What can I group? All those kind of things to make sure that you're actually responding to everything. And look at your flow. That's the other thing too. As you guys are writing down the arguments that are being said, you want to see like what are the flows? What are they dropping? Like, for example, in my speech, I'm like, oh, they dropped this, but that's only because I have a flow and all these things. So that's one thing I'll say. In terms of the role of the ballot, for the purpose of this debate, I'm just trying to give you like a way of like thinking like by voting for me, this is what you are signifying essentially. Like by voting for me, I want you to vote for me based on what it means, like by giving me this ballot essentially for the purpose of this debate. And then sometimes it can get more elaborate in terms of like with the framework arguments. But for most of the debaters on this call, it's really just thinking about like, what is the purpose? What is your vote would mean in the context of this round? Like vote for the team that does blah, 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 vote for this and that does blah, blah, blah. That's really the general idea around the role of the ballot.
Thank you. Kelly appears to still be prepping, so I want to point to, you're good, or you want to keep prepping? Yeah. Fenway High School has a question as well. I just want to make a note about time because, first of all, debaters, I see some. I know there may be the end of school day for some. There may be some movement going on. You guys are awesome. This has been a long time on a Zoom. and coaches and other educators at the schools, thank you for your support. It's amazing. So we will try to finish this round if we have time. I think we probably can finish it, and we will give a vote. So if you can kind of stick with us, if you don't have to leave, that's awesome, because then you can hear these important rebuttal speeches, which bring in the strategy that Raina was talking about. And then we will close out by 3. Larry has a strategy here in the chat as well.
Okay, I'm ready. So before I give my speech, a couple things. So like everyone has been saying, the 1AR yes is extremely time-pressed speech. So in a real debate, or not a real debate, but depending as you advance to the varsity stages, you'll have a 5-minute period to answer 13 minutes of speech. So it's like a lot. So there are like 2 strategies I kind of would recommend to combating that time-pressed nature of the 1AR is, first, you're more than welcome to take prep on the app in between the neg block. You have to make sure you don't, use too much, because you still have to allocate and divide out for the rest, but you can strategically do that to kind of get yourself centered and be like, okay, I've done that speech, now to move on to the next. The second thing that, and you'll notice I'll do this throughout the speech, is I cannot possibly answer every single argument in the block. Like, how could I? That's like not possible. So what I will be doing is strategically dropping arguments. So I will either group arguments or kind of phrase things in such a way that I may not exactly respond to every single thing they said, but it's kind of touched on, or the things that I don't touch on aren't as important. We'll see how this goes. Okay. Is anyone not ready? The role of the ballot is to vote for the team that makes the world net better than the status quo. Fracking is net bad for human health. It releases carcinogens and permanently damages the water supply. If we prove we preserve the health of just one person, the affirmative makes the world net better than the status quo, and solvency on climate change advantage is irrelevant. So first is onto the coal debate. Coal will not come back. Our Wooler evidence indicates the framing issue that 400 huge companies and corporations like Nike, etc., who are the main users of coal, are waiting for a signal from the United States federal government regarding energy investment to commit to renewable energy. On to the United States leadership debate. Larry literally said leadership is not key, but leadership is key, but not sufficient. What does that even mean? Then, if anything, is the first step to stopping warming. Also, the Robisky evidence is talking about eluding people with small shifts, like marketing campaigns, like creating smaller and thinner aluminum cans. It's not talking about huge, large federal policies, such as banning the entirety of fracking. Our Roberts evidence indicates with a combination of 5 different technologies, like solar power and it names 4 others, but that is enough to have a robust enough energy reserve in order to combat anything. They say that that fracking doesn't hurt people. Our evidence is very clear about fracking being negative detriment to health. It releases a cocktail of 5 different chemicals that's terrible. Also, it makes it so water cannot be recycled and refueled back into the population, so that becomes unusable. Also, their IPAA evidence is an international petroleum organization. Of course, they're going to be advocating for fracking because they can frack more oil. They say green investments, onto their green investments argument, cross-apply the renewable energy reserve explanation from above about how we have a robust enough system in the status quo. Rainer said that we're not inherent. However, first of all, we did address that in the 2AC, and also bans that are taking place in the status quo aren't federal bans. They're just bans within the state. Our Wooler evidence indicates that a federal government shift isn't needed to incentivize corporations in order to shift and devote their energy into those energy reserves they have ready in the status quo. Also, just because we're enacting a plan that's been proposed in Congress but not passed doesn't make us not inherent. It just makes us changing the status quo. Onto the solvency debate. We don't need to solve, we just have to solve the entirety of climate change. We just have to prove that a world of the affirmative is net better than a world of the status quo, i.e. helping people save their health. Also, we have to stop, Rainer says we're not here because warming or we won't stop because warming's existed past in the status before the act. However, we have to stop before a threshold of 2 degrees warming. Of course, warming's been going on for a long time. The act is key to stop it now.
Thank you.
I'm having like
Things are
flashbacks
heating up. Things are heating up. That's all I have to say. Larry, do you want time?
Yeah, I should be ready in like two-ish minutes.
Awesome.
And debaters, if you have any questions or any that you have about how things are going or just like a strategy, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. We'll be happy to answer.
Wait, also, another quick thing. You're also totally welcome to talk to your partner during prep. We're just not doing it because neither of us had the foresight to like go on a call or like something, and it's weird to just talk in the main Zoom room, but like
Yeah.
you should do that in a real round.
That is true. It helps.
Something I would also highly recommend. I was a 2N when I was in high school. So I was like besties with my partner. So another thing we would do right before the 1AR prep is I would hand her all of my flows, which is why it's extra nice to have really nice flows. And she would circle in a really brightly colored pen everything that she definitely wanted to be in the 1AR. So when she wanted to extend it in the 2AR, it was for sure there.
Should be done. Sorry. And Kelly, I was also noticing that your flows are very legible.
Yes, I would highly
That's impressive. That is impressive.
Yeah, I mean, they get progressively as I prep. First of all, I'm out of space now. I'm the 1AR, so low stakes, but they progressively get like crazier as I'm prepping. So
we'll send out, maybe if we can take photos of it and send it out to everyone, your flow.
I'm not sure how helpful it would be, but of course.
While we are, while Larry is waiting, prepping, I'm sorry, I'm actually going to put a couple of links because I know we're coming towards the end. So I'm going to put the the attendance link for coaches, and there's both a debater and coach exit ticket. So you can take a moment now to fill that in if you haven't already, the attendance. If debaters can fill this out on their phone, that's great. And coaches as well.
I also had a comment on flowing because I was ranting about it a moment ago, is if you're a debater, I would highly recommend flowing on paper personally. When I judge, I flow on my computer, but in general, it's like very nice to have something like separate from your screens because like everything, your evidence and everything's all there. So that's one reason. But the second reason is if your computer crashes, then you at least have like a physical record of the debate round that you can like go off of and kind of recover.
These are pro tips here. Really spongy stuff now.
If there's no other questions, oh my god, I got pen ink on my white desk.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Is anybody not ready? The role of the ballot is to vote for the team who has argued the best modes of addressing climate change. The 1AR may have sounded pretty, saying that the AF being net better than the status quo, helping with health, is enough to vote affirmative, but they have raised the matter of climate change and the impact is greater. Their Obama evidence talks about impending refugee crises, sea level rise, and health effects as a result of climate change, which means that if we can prove that the plan will cause a net negative progress in the environmental movement, then you should vote negative. Now, you should vote for the team with the most salient explanation for how we can arrive at our shared goal of climate change mitigation. Neither of us have contested in this round that climate change is a major issue, and the 1AR cannot just throw that away. Now, I'll start with the argument that they make about coal. First, yes, we will revert back to coal. It's all about price and access. Without sufficient infrastructure, there are places that will still revert to coal. Just because Nike and other companies are ready to transition to renewable energies does not mean that they have proven there is sufficient national infrastructure to do so, which means that you should be highly skeptical of our ability to suddenly move to renewable energies. You can't just ship solar panels to Ohio and expect them to use them tomorrow, but they can burn coal right away. Second, their evidence is about carbon caps. The Wohler evidence is talking about businesses and other countries looking for signals that are as large as what China and the European Union have already done, such as signaling that they will go carbon neutral by a certain year. Banning fracking as such is a drop in the bucket. 13 million metric tons of greenhouse gases out of 6,500 million metric tons in an entire year means that the plan is akin to the aluminum cans that they're referencing. The Rubitsky evidence is relative. The question is whether or not you think there is a viable alternative that has been presented that we can focus our energies on instead. So right now, in this current political moment, with proposals like the Green New Deal and other countries leading on climate change via things like carbon caps and goals to go carbon neutral, you should instead vote negative to not ban fracking and instead push for these larger environmental movements that don't allow the Biden administration to claim environmental wins and wins with activists just because they've done something. Something is insufficient in the status quo. Now, the last argument about fracking being bad for health, their evidence is only about the possible effects. I buy it. The chemical effects of fracking could harm people if they got to people. But the IPA evidence cites other studies that have shown, including from the National Resources Defense Council, that people will not be affected by these chemicals that are used in fracking, which means that the climate change impact outweighs. You should vote negative because you believe in the Green New Deal over banning fracking as a broader, cohesive strategy that we should focus our energies on, that banning fracking would just sap energy from.
Thank you. Christian, you're closing us out.
True, but I will take some prep.
Yes. So other, debaters, I don't know if people are flowing yourselves. I think I definitely see some people with notes. So take this time as well, particularly high school debaters. If you're debating at the JV level or higher and you are 11th or 12th grader, you were invited to be a judge at the middle school debates. And some of you, I think, have already done this. So one of the things on the judge end is the prep time is key to organizing your thoughts and evaluating the arguments, looking back at your flow, thinking through the feedback you'd give to each of your debaters. So this is particularly in the rebuttals, doing it after each speech during the debater's prep time. It's important judge prep time as well. Any other thoughts as Christian preps? Examples of great argumentation that you heard from any of the debaters so far? Some particularly strong arguments. I know there were some shout outs. Thank you. It looks like Hurley has to go for dismissal. Thank you so much. I know we're coming right up on 3, so we will honor your time. But we have one more important speech to hear.
I do have a comment as we approach the last speech. I would highly caution debaters to not stop flowing, even if you end debating early on in the debate round. So A, flowing practice in general is like super awesome for you. But B, if you want to be able to help your partner, you need to be paying attention and have like comprehensive notes. So just make sure you're paying attention and flowing, even if you're done speaking for that round.
I love all this emphasis on flowing. This is it's very important. Even debaters who get to the JV level, even varsity, and haven't really developed good flowing habits, it affects not only debate success, but flowing is a really just useful discipline to really organize and track arguments just in life. So we are pro flowing here at the BDL.
Yeah, especially at the varsity level, I don't see how you survive without writing things down, unless you have like a prodigious memory where it's like you just literally remember everything.
Yes, and debaters, feel free to put in the chat your own experiences with flowing as well. Christian, it looks like you're trying, are you? Oh, sorry, I think I muted you by accident. You are still muted though.
You know, that happened. That's the first time it's actually happened to me on Zoom. I guess I'm for the most part ready. I mean, I just, just gonna give it, try it, and we'll see where this goes. I will be timing myself as well. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Great. So first I would like to, first of all, say thank you to everybody here. But first I want to get right into it and talk about the role of the ballot, right? So the negative claim that the role of ballot should be whichever team has the best modes, or not solving climate change, but who has the best means of solving climate change, but actually, and that the AF raise the stakes, and that banning fracking would make it a perceived, would mitigate the effects of, would mitigate our attempts or our future potential of reducing climate change. But actually, like Kelly stated, we did redefine the role of the ballot, that we just as the app have to prove that the world is better, or there's net good within the app plan, even if it's just one person who is not dead or who's not a casualty of climate change or of health. That is the only way when debate. The role of the ballot has shifted since the beginning, and the negative has to accept that. And then moving on to the coal and access, the argument that if we reduce or ban fracking, we're going to go shift back to coal. During cross-examination, I asked for if there's a way to quantify which if renewable energy is more or less beneficiary in terms of like fiscal or like economically than coal, and there was no quantifiable answer to that. They could not give me an answer. Like they said it would vary state by state, but that's not really a direct answer. And if that's really going to be the case, then it's probably better to just go with the AF plan, which produces net good in the world and at least does something. And then the term of the argument that something is not sufficient in the status quo, something is sufficient. If the AF can prove that we do more good within the plan than not, then that's all we have to win the debate. And then yeah, that's kind of it for the most part, but I'm still gonna let the time run just in case I can think of anything else. And also kind of would like to talk more about fracking itself. We have these systems in place, right? Fracking, reducing, even if it may not seem as major as now, like the 13 million metric tons out of 165, right? In the future, that could potentially be more. And who knows at what point that we can't say, oh, let's go back to fracking. Let's cut back on that. There's no way to know in the future when we're going to when we get to a certain point where we can't do that. So why not start it now, and why not start early before it actually becomes a problem in the future? And that's what the AF plan is doing. It is a first vital step in an attempt to better our future, not only as a nation, but for the whole world.
Awesome. Let us give it up for our four amazing debaters and debate educators here, to Kelly, Christian, Rainer, and Larry. Woo! That was a clinic.